Hello, my name's Laura Lear and welcome to the Thoughtful Leadership Podcast from Ambitious. My guest today is a really interesting individual. She's worked her way up at an organisation in the UK called Kohler Mira, from admin all the way through to managing director over her 20 years. So I'm really excited to dig into the role, how she achieved that, and also some of the challenges and also the opportunities she's had as a leader in this space. So welcome to the podcast today, Emma Foster.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Can we start with just talking a bit about Kohler Mira, the business, what it is, just for the listeners so they can hear a bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. I think when you hear Kohler Mira, you probably don't automatically recognise who we are, but maybe when I tell you that our biggest brand is Mira Showers, then maybe that's who people have heard of. About a third of the people in the UK could name us spontaneously if asked to name a shower brand. So that's by far our biggest brand. We were purchased by the Kohler family in 2001, which is why it has the Kohler name.
Right, okay.
They're American. They are the second biggest bathroom manufacturer in the world. There's about 35,000 associates around the whole world. So in the UK, we're Kohler Mira. As I say, Mira Showers is our biggest brand. Then we also have RADA, which is our commercial brand. So that's where you'd see showers in hospitals, student accommodation, things like that. And then recently we purchased a business called Recoup, which is wastewater heat recovery. So that's part of our drive to be more sustainable in the UK. But yeah, about 750 employees in the UK. So a reasonable size business.
So there'll be a lot of people listening who will have showers.
Yes, I hope so.
That are Mira Showers.
Yes, absolutely.
And it'll be good in a minute. I'd love to talk a bit about the sustainability drive. That's really important. But I think firstly, it'd be lovely just to talk a little bit about the journey, your own journey, because I think that's just amazing kind of journey from admin through marketing to managing director, which I think you've been in that position for the last couple of years.
Yes,
is that right?
Yeah, isn't it coming up to 3?
Wow.
So not the most conventional way of steering your career, but I don't think any is. I didn't have a job when I came out of university. I did a business studies degree in Portsmouth, and I got a temporary job at Mira Showers in HR, doing filing and all sorts of things. And then it was just after the time that we'd been bought by Kohler Company. And so there was an administrative role that came along that it was meant to be for 3 months. And to this day, I haven't actually ever had an interview, which is my sort of claim to fame. I mean, I think probably I've had an interview every day of that working life.
I'm sure.
But so, yes, I did admin initially, and then some time in marketing. I did product marketing, worked in our channel marketing teams, which is really all about our go-to-market strategy, working really closely with our customers. Ran the brand and communications team. Then I was marketing director for 5 years, which was just a totally fabulous role. And then, like I say, coming up to 3 years as managing director. So, yeah.
And it's interesting, where you've been before you take on the managing director role, and obviously going through the marketing and understanding customers and product and how you go to market. Do you think that was really key in terms of giving you that really good sort of bedrock to take on the role?
Absolutely. I think fundamental. And I think in the role as marketing director, I was really part of doing the strategy of the business. And I think if you're an integral part of that process, you have to understand your products and your customers ultimately. And certainly the channel role enabled me to really understand our customers. But then in communications, you learn more and more about the consumers, the installers, the people who specify your product. So, over the years, I've had an amazing experience and quite a broad brush experience of the business. And I think growing up through it enables you to understand a bit about what people are doing.
Yeah. So were you able to take on that role just through having been there, or there wasn't an interview process to
No
go
interview
through
process. No. I mean, Kohler is a business that's really passionate about people and progression. And talent planning. And so that's something that we do every year, and we look at our talent. And really, I think your development is your own to own. And if you're passionate about it, then so it was something that had been discussed with the leaders, and so it was sort of knew it was coming, but didn't think it was coming that quickly. So my boss moved into a more global role, and then the role was vacant, and they asked me to do it. And I think timing is never perfect, and I certainly didn't feel like I could certainly do it overnight, but 3 years in, I'd say I feel a little bit more comfortable doing it than I did initially, for sure.
But it says a lot about the business that you've been there for 20 years. What's kept you there? Obviously, opportunity, but it must be, you'd love to hear a bit about the culture and the style of how it looks after its people, and what's really kept you in that business.
I think ultimately you hit the nail on the head when you say opportunity, because I think my personal philosophy is you've got to keep learning, and the day that there's nothing else to learn is probably the day to move on. And believe me, there's always so much to learn. So I think that's the piece for me, is to keep learning. And the people are so fundamental to that. Our strategy is built around the premise of the triple bottom line. So that John Elkington model that talks about people, planet and profit. And I think, there's no reason, it's really clear why people are first in that. And to me, and that's a real big part of my leadership, which is put the people at the heart, because the business can't achieve anything without people. And so I think continuing to listen to different perspectives, to bring more diverse perspectives is really key. And so we're lucky. We have a really lovely culture in the business. There's quite a family feel to it. And I think that's probably helped by being family owned at a US level. But certainly in the UK, there's that kind of culture of mucking in all together.
Yeah, it's so important. And that's one of the reasons we started the podcast, and the whole thoughtful leadership piece was around the importance of looking at people and planet alongside profit. And actually they do work together. And if you get the people piece right, actually that will support the profit and your margins. But I mean, culture and kind of creating that culture takes time and effort as well. Are there things that you have in place, any sort of key areas that you focus on to really build that?
I think the fundamentals are there. The business is over 100 years old in the UK. So I think the fact that the fundamentals are there, that we have processes and ways of doing things that are expected, of course, but the world is changing. We have to think differently about how we hear different perspectives. One of the things that we introduced last year was what we call mutual mentoring. So we took 10 associates from across the business. They volunteered, and each of them had a protected characteristic, and we paired them up with members of the leadership team so that we could really understand what it is to have those kind of lived experiences and bring some of those things back into the organisation and try and adapt our ways of recruiting or leading or running types of meetings, just to think differently. And I think, there's always work to be done, but that's certainly helped us for sure.
And in terms of diversity inclusion, I know you're very passionate about that personally, and as a business leader, and manufacturing in itself is always a challenging space when it comes to that diversity piece. What have you been doing as a business to really focus on that and building that diversity across the organisation?
I mean, when I think back to when I started 22 years ago, the shape of the organisation is very different.
I bet.
And the industry, I think, you're right. It's manufacturing and it's plumbing. So, it is inherently male dominated. Our business has about 66% men.
Okay.
So we definitely are still in a male dominated environment. But that doesn't mean to say that we haven't changed. So I think from a gender diversity, things have changed for sure. But then I think also there's work to be done in other areas of diversity. And one of the things that we've adopted from the US business is business resource groups.
Right.
So we have 4 currently in the UK. One is Women at Work, which I'm the exec sponsor of globally, which is really about encouraging women in the workplace and to have a voice and to do things differently. And we do some great things in the community in that regard too. We've worked with a really great business called Stopcocks, which is female plumbers.
Oh, wow.
So, really encouraging them and helping them and helping to promote them. And then our other business resource groups, one's called Boldability, which is all around people with disabilities. One is called REACH, which is race, ethnicity and cultural heritage. And then the last is Proud, so our LGBTQ plus community. So I think just leaning in and like I say, just hearing different perspectives is absolutely key to the business continuing to be successful for sure.
And how do you go about doing that as a leader? Do you, in terms of what's your leadership style? I'd love to learn a bit about that. And how do you sort of use that, your own leadership style to bring on these groups and to support some of that work?
I think inherently my style is all based around people. I am a very empathetic leader. When you do any of these sort of Myers-Briggs or any of the, psychometric testing, it always comes out and says, lots of green energy, lots of people first energy, which I think is important both for our people and for our customer base. Probably one of the best things I've ever done. I did a course when I was, pretty young in my career, which was all around strengths and, really taking what you are good at and making it a superpower, rather than always being about developing something you're not so good at. So there's a place for development, of course there is, and we always have to, all of us have got things to develop in that we're not necessarily experts in. But I really love the premise of take something that you're already good at and then turn it into a superpower. And I think it's really empowering for people. So that's something we've adopted, certainly across my leadership team and into some of the different teams within the organisation, is actually it's how do you take those strengths and really try and build on them so that you as an individual, but then collectively as a team, you understand where are the strengths within the team? Who is the person to go to who can bounce something off? How do we learn from each other? And I think that's how collectively you become stronger as a group, for sure.
That strengths-based piece, I think, is so important. I think so often people are trying to create, individuals and create something that they're not, or say you need to be doing this as well, and actually focusing on those strengths kind of lead to more success for the overall organisation, and it's kind of what makes a team, isn't it?
It's so empowering for people, I think. I think if you're relentlessly told you could develop in this area because you're not very good at it, it's a very different mindset to thinking about how can you develop in something that you're already good at. And I think that's the piece, is how do you unlock potential in people? That's my focus is, I love to, one of my top strengths is developer. So, actually, how do you take that kind of strength and just try and unlock it in people so they can be the best version of themselves?
I think that's amazing, isn't it, to be in that leadership role, to be able to do that, because I think you often get that kind of leaders, and it's moved on a lot in certain industries and across the board in terms of that kind of people approach rather than just this is what we've got to do as a business. But I think it's so critical in today's world. And I suppose just on the graduates, and we're not necessarily just graduates, bringing people into an organisation, coming out of college, coming out of school, coming out of lots of different avenues. And I know you've got lots of programmes that focus on that and skills and bringing them into the business. Could you talk a bit about that?
Sure. I mean, it's a complex area. Super proud of our early careers provision. And I think at any one time in the business, we've got around 20 to 25 young people. So they come through different routes. So we have always a programme of apprentices. We take engineering apprentices and also business apprentices. And so they rotate around different departments in the organisation. It just gives them a really broad career perspective rather than having to narrow down straight away, what do I want to do with my career? Because, when you're a young person coming out of school, how do you know what you want to do?
So hard,
with your career? So those perspectives. But then we also offer year in industries.
Okay.
So where someone's doing a degree, take the third year as a placement in the business. And again, we do that across many parts of the organisation. And it helps give people a real different perspective. So I did a year in industry myself, so very passionate about those, because I think you just get a great learning, much more than you can get from a textbook. And then you go back and you do your final year at university and you can put some of the things you learned in practice.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing. We see those young people come to us, first day, terrified, and now they then leave us, really kind of, having grown so much as people. And very often, we'll take people back into the organisation after their final year, or some of our apprentices have gone through the organisation and
it's amazing, isn't it?
Have been on the board, So it is amazing. And I think it comes back to what I was saying about that ability to develop people through the organisation.
Absolutely.
When you can see other people who have been apprentice like you are now and they're sitting on the board of directors, that's inspiring.
It's amazing, isn't it? Just thinking, because the education system at the moment, many would say, doesn't necessarily fit the mould for the workplace out there, and actually apprenticeships are a great way, aren't they, for people to get that real first-hand experience. And I mean, the manufacturing space, obviously you straddle a few, the other areas as well in terms of the bathrooms and sort of plumbing, but how has that shifted? You talked a bit about the kind of, it was very male dominated, it's moved on. Sounds like actually you've got from a gender diversity perspective, the business is reasonably good, has moved a long way. How has that shifted across the broader industry itself?
I mean, I think there's a lot to do still in our industry, and like I say, there is an element of shifting in gender, but I would say that there's a number of occasions when I will be the only female in a room of leaders in our industry. So there's definitely work to do in that space. But the Bathroom Association is part of driving that. So most of us who are manufacturing in the UK and so part of the supply chain are part of that association. And they're really trying to push more diversity. They have a female CEO as well.
Yeah.
So I think we're doing better in terms of gender diversity. I think there's much more to do in terms of other protected characteristics, for sure.
Okay. And then back to I'm really interested in the culture piece again, because I think it's so key, isn't it? And we had a previous episode with Steve Hewitt from Gymshark, and he talked about actually the whole success of the business was based on the culture. He talked about this idea of he wanted employees to feel like Sunday night was like Christmas Eve every single week, which, let's face it, is a pretty tall order, really. Yep. But I think kind of I'm sure you've got people who run the sort of internal programs around people and culture, but from your perspective, what else do you need to do as an organisation to really instill that? I know you said it comes from that kind of the foundations of the business, but are there any kind of specific activities that you deploy as an organisation to build that culture?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are really important to us. One is feedback. So we have an actual kind of a focused feedback model that we use. And I think it's really important that people give each other feedback, that it doesn't always come from your manager, that you understand what people are thinking that's really good about what you're doing, what you could do better, because that way I think you help everyone to learn. And it's a bit like I was saying about the strengths. So that piece is really important to us. And then the other one is storytelling. So actually, how do we share stories when things are going really well, or when things haven't gone necessarily that well? I think it's really important to do that. So I do a company brief every other month where I'll speak to all of our associates across the entire organisation in different groups, and we'll usually try and share some stories. We structure that People, Planet, Profit, so they can hear, here are some of the great people things we're doing, particularly some of the community outreach. If we've done fundraising for a charity, or if we've done some of the STEM outreach to schools, things like that, we'll tell those stories. Same with Planet, same with Profit, because I think it's important that people hear what other departments are doing. What are people doing across the organisation? How are we going to hit our sales number because of something that someone has done in the service team or the sales team, or because we the products that we're manufacturing now. So I think it's really important, and that drives that culture. The idea of giving each other recognition, of telling stories, but then also giving feedback when things could be better or when they're great.
Absolutely. No, that's a bit like a town hall, I suppose, exactly, going around.
Yeah.
And how many people do you have across the UK now?
It's about 750
Okay,
of us. So yes, we've got the head office is in Cheltenham, which is the main manufacturing plant. And then we've got a plant in Hull where we make shower trays. And then we've got distribution centre in Worcester. And obviously our field-based teams for service and for sales as well. And then the Recoup team, which are small but perfectly formed. They're in Norfolk.
Okay.
And then we've also got a Dutch subsidiary as well.
So, and
so
tell us a bit about Recoup, actually. It'd be interesting to understand a bit more about them.
So we purchased Recoup in 2023. Okay. It's wastewater heat recovery.
Right.
So what on earth does that mean? Well, in simple terms, when you shower, the water that goes down the drain is still quite warm. And what wastewater heat recovery does is uses the residual heat and the energy from it to heat the incoming water.
Yeah.
So it's amazing because it is helping our business to be more sustainable. But the key really is that technology is used to help house builders to build more carbon efficient homes.
Okay.
So that's why we purchased them, and we're seeing some great success with Recoup.
Oh, brilliant. And so, because sustainability, you touched on at the start, big focus for the business.
Absolutely.
And so that's one part of that. What other sort of strategies do you deploy and focus on to support that?
Fundamentally, we are working in an industry that uses a lot of water and a lot of energy, our electric showers, in the manufacturing of and in the use of. So I think if we really are going to be here for the next 100 years, we have to think about how we make the business more sustainable. So we focus in a number of different areas, and you can read all of the detail in our ESG report that we publish on our website. But I think when you think about actually our processes, what are we doing from a recycling point of view? How are we testing our products? We used to test everything with water. We test a lot with air now. So some of the things that we're doing in the factory. But then also the products that we're designing as well. How do we make them more sustainable? And our UK-based innovation teams are constantly looking at how do we give consumers a great experience but use less water.
And in your role, how involved do you get then in the innovation? Is it understanding, do they come to you with the ideas, or, how does it work? I'm always interested in these large organisations, and in your role, you can't be across everything all the time.
No, definitely not. So we have each of our categories.
Yeah.
So each of our showering categories or each of our products categories has a category strategy, which we tend to review at least every year, maybe every 6 months. And then we have a new product schedule that goes out 5 years. Which I will be part of a meeting once a month where we're looking at what are the products that are coming through, where are they in the stage gate process of bringing those things to market. And we take that also to the US as well. We'll present that once a year to David Kohler so that he can understand what's happening in the UK versus what's happening in other parts of the world. So I think there's two things. There's the reliance on our commercial facing teams to come with ideas, gaps in the market that we've seen. But then also we've got a great group of creative engineers and designers in the business that will also, do lots of different hot housing and come up with different ideas and, spend a bit of time spraying some water around. And there come some of the best ideas that we've had. And we just allow them to innovate and to play, and they come up with things that, are sometimes just amazing innovations
That's the key thing, isn't it? Innovation. You've obviously got to do what you do really well, but you've always got to be thinking ahead in terms of the market and competition. We chatted to the creative director for iPhone and iPad recently here, and that was so interesting. Again, he said it's that innovation and being brave and allowing people to go and try things and test things. If you don't give them that opportunity, you're not going to be able to innovate and come up with new ideas all the time. So
I've been to some of those sort of, we call them hot houses, where we'll get people together from across the organisation. And I can remember going to one when I was really junior in the marketing team and saying, could we do this? And the engineers were, no, of course not. Of course we can't do that. Ridiculous. And then suddenly you just see someone kind of just actually play with a few ideas. So just getting those nuggets of ideas from people who are, real consumers. And then quite often they turn into something that can be done, that can be turned into a real innovation.
And in terms of the skills in the sector more broadly, is that still one of the biggest challenges that the sector has and that you have as an organisation, getting the right skills on board?
I think that's something that, it certainly is a challenge, and there's certainly pockets of challenge there, but that's where the early careers provision comes in, because really what we find in some of those areas is training our own, building our own talent from the ground up, for sure.
So that's a real focus, hence why. And did you think back then when you were kind of in that admin role that was that an aim of yours, MD?
No, definitely not. No, absolutely not. I think, I had a business studies degree. I'd always had an idea of wanting to be in marketing and marketing. And as I spent more time in marketing, then certainly the marketing director position was an aspiration, but certainly not this job.
And is that it? Do you think, have you got bigger aspirations?
I don't know. I mean,
international?
Like I said earlier, I think, one of the things that is really important to me is continuing to learn. And I've got lots to learn in this job still. So I think hopefully there's a little bit more time in this one yet.
And how are you invested in terms of your own learning? Do you have kind of coaching and support? I'm always interested to, understand, because, there are lots of people out there who think you get into those roles and that's it. You've got it all. And we all know you don't. You are learning all the time. So do you have your own sort of training and coaching?
Yes, I do. So Kohler's very good at that for us. Also, I'm part of the executive management team across the whole of Kohler Company, and they get us together a couple of times a year, and usually there's some training as part of that. And real kind of consistency in leadership then across the business. But then I do also have an executive coach who's a fabulous woman who I've worked with for about 10 years, who was one of the first female partners at PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Oh, wow, okay.
So she really understands and really focuses her business on women and female leadership and how do we lead in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's where that strengths piece came from. That's the first time I ever did that, was really that actually women are a bit different in leadership.
Yeah.
We do have a different way of going around doing things, and that strengths-based piece has been really successful for me from the back of that.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. We did the red, green. We've done the colours, which again, it's just so useful for people to understand who they're dealing with in the as an agency, and to understand the sort of what works for somebody doesn't necessarily work for someone else. So yeah, fascinating.
I do think all of those things are important as a combination, because I think I never want to be put into a box as
absolutely
you're a green, you're a red, and I think it's all those different lenses. But when you bring that together and you really understand the individuals, then that's where you can have some success.
Would you be comfortable talking about any of the challenges you faced through your career, and what's been the biggest, points where you've really thought, gosh, this is really hard now?
I think certainly the female piece has been a challenge in a very male-dominated industry. And actually, it was quite shortly after I'd taken this job, and I went to an event with some customers at it, and someone said to me, "Oh, I think it's great." And I said, "What's great?" "Well, you getting this job." And I said, "Oh, thanks. I think it's great too." Being a girl.
Oh, goodness me.
I thought, my goodness me. We're only talking, a couple of years ago. And I thought things have moved on a bit from that. So, I think it's a reminder that it's still not that common. So I think, that's why I'm really invested in our young females as well. We can't have that. It's not a good thing that I'm in this job because I'm a girl.
No.
So I think that's something that was a real reminder for sure.
And you must, in your role, it's about building a really great team around you, isn't it? So you can only do what you do without those brilliant people. Again, is most of that recruiting within and building people up in terms of that talent, or do you also go out to look for great people to join the team?
A combination. An absolute balance. It's probably about 50-50 at the moment, where we've got people on the board who have come through the business, who've had great experience, longevity, And that helps. But then we've also got people that we've recruited in, because I think especially as we need more and more different skills, we need to hear from different people, different perspectives. So yeah, we've got a balance in my team, which is great.
And in terms of the manufacturing sector, looking ahead, next 5 years, what are the big things on the horizon that you are sort of navigating and considering as a leader?
I think certainly we've already touched on the piece around sustainability. So that's really, really key. And as a bathroom association, we gathered last year at Windsor Castle for a conversation and a summit that was all around two really key areas that we as a industry need to commit to. And one was about water scarcity, and the other is about antimicrobial resistance. So sanitation from a water perspective. There are swathes of the world that don't have access to clean water, but also there are pathogens and things that grow in water. And as a Western world, we're becoming quite immune through our antibiotics and things. So two really important things that we as an industry have committed to: raise awareness of and educate people, but most importantly innovate around. So I think from a bathroom industry, that's something we signed the Windsor Declaration at Windsor Castle that really puts us all in that position of innovating in that space. So I think that whole piece around sustainability is a really important one. Then, like you say, the world is changing so quickly. Consumer expectations are changing, and also the way everybody shops, the way we are using things like AI, the way that the world is changing. So we have to be mindful of that, and we have to have the skill sets in place and the ability to talk to people in different ways. So they're things certainly that we're focused on.
Well, we couldn't have a conversation without AI.
No, indeed.
It's always going to be. And as you touched on it, you are presumably as a business looking at how AI can support you across the board in terms of skills, being additive to the human process.
I think that's the key, isn't it, Laura? Which is it should never replace humans. I don't think it can replace humans, but it can make things quicker. It can make processes more efficient.
Absolutely.
And then I think with the right prompts and human interaction, it'll just make us faster, more efficient. Many of the things that we do in our processes, in manufacturing, in the huge amount of data analysis that we do, lots of those things, in understanding personas, a lot of those things. So.
It's fascinating. We've just been through training, and actually what's come out of it is, yes, we've a greater understanding, but also just that view that it isn't going to do all our jobs at all. Actually, it's additive, it enhances what we can do, but you still need that human lens, creativity, innovation.
I think that's great you've done that training. I think that we need to do more of that, because I think there's a bit of a fear of it.
Yes, absolutely.
We're using it in our day-to-day
It's just quite
lives.
overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. So I think just understanding more about that and how we can enhance our lives is really important.
If you were talking to somebody, one of the listeners who maybe is coming out of school or potentially early on in career, thinking actually this sounds like the sort of industry, organisation I'd like to get into, what would your advice be to them?
That's a great question, and quite often a question I get asked by our apprentices and things like, what's your advice? And I think it's quite simple, and that is that you should say yes to things. So you're going to be offered loads of different opportunities as you go through life, and they won't always be perfect, and the timing won't always be right, but say yes and have a go, because if someone's offering you an opportunity, they're invested in you. And I think it's easy to feel like, I don't think I can do it, but actually have a go. And you'll learn so much. So I think it's really important. You jump in head first, give everything, give your effort, and then have a go. And I say that because, as I say, I'm asked it quite often. And then when I was invited to do this role, I thought, well, I better take my own advice. I'm going to have a go at this. But I think that's really important.
Oh, it's great advice. And obviously you're a brilliant role model for people looking at kind of what you can achieve with, as you say, taking those opportunities and hard work. So thank you. It's been so great to talk to you today, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.